I just wanted to walk you through some of the homework problems to get you started on Chapter 9. Some of the more difficult topics, such as the cash receipt schedule and cash disbursement schedule. This exercise is exercise 9-17. So if you wanted to open that up and walk through, we can do that. This is a much more comprehensive look at that problem, just to kind of go through the schedule here and what you're going to need to know for all the problems. So the details in this problem tell you the amount of sales for each month, and then they tell you that 30% of those sales are collected in cash, which means 70% go into accounts receivable. It then further tells you that 10% of those accounts receivable are collected during the month, 50% are collected that following month, and then 36% are collected in that third month, which means 4% are uncollectible. Since we're only looking at our cash receipts, we're going to ignore that for now. So to find out how much was made in cash, we're going to take our sales and we're going to multiply that by that 30%, and that will show us our cash for that period. To get to the accounts receivable, I'll take my sales, subtract how much of that was in cash, and it's going to tell me that 140,000 of that go into accounts receivable. Now I've built a schedule to show then how much of that is collected in January, February, and March. To do that, I will take the accounts receivable and I'm going to multiply that by 10% for January, 50% for February, and 36% for March. We're going to do that again for February. So I take my sales, I'm going to multiply that by 30% to get my cash portion. Then I'm going to find out how much of those sales, by subtracting my cash, go into accounts receivable. Now in February, obviously I can't collect anything in January, so that will be blank. But then that 10% goes into February, the 50% goes into March, and then 36% are looking further down the line in April. So let's focus on March now, and I'll walk you through exactly how to do each of these. So in March, again, I take my sales. I'm going to multiply that by 30% to get my cash portion. Then I'm going to take the sales minus my cash to get my accounts receivable amount. My March sales, the first month I collect is in March. So that would be 10% during that month. So I take my accounts receivable and I'm going to multiply it by 10%. In April, I'll take that same accounts receivable. I'm going to multiply it by 50%. And in May, then, I'm going to take that same accounts receivable and I'm going to multiply that by 36%. What we want to do then is just kind of add down to figure out how much cash collections are can we count on for that month. Now we don't have other months listed here, but that's okay. This will give you the idea. So if I want to sum up everything that's happening there, wrong thing. Let me just add it since there's only one. I'm going to add that January. In February, I'm going to look at what was collected both from January and from February. For March, I'm going to look at what did I collect from January plus what did I collect from February plus what did I collect from March to get my total cash collections based on my credit sales. So this problem is actually only looking for March. For that reason, I'm going to look at everything I collected here from my credit sales, plus I'm going to look at how much cash did I collect in March. So all of that would be included so I can see how much money I can expect to receive during March. Now the same concept applies when I'm looking at my purchases and how much I'm going to be spending during that same time. Here, we have 50% of our purchases are paid immediately in cash. The other 50% are going into accounts payable. So I'm going to take my purchases and times that by 50%. So then I'll know how much is going into cash or coming from cash, how much is going into that accounts payable. And I'm going to do that for each month. So here's my purchases, times that by 50%. I know how much is in cash. And since it's the same amount, times it again by 50%. And I know how much is in that accounts payable. There we go. So now I can look at how much do I have to pay in cash each month and how much then do I have to look at what I'm spending. The problem tells us that 40% of those accounts payable are paid within the month and 60% are paid that following month. So I'm going to only look at the amount I owe, and I'm going to kind of build that schedule based on those, on the 40% during the month, 60% the following month. So I'm going to take that $15,000 in the accounts payable and times it by 40%. In February, I take again that $15,000 and I times it by 60%. And I'm going to do that again in February. Here's the amount I owe. For that first month is 40%. And then in March, it would be the 60%. And I'll do that again for the March purchases. 19,000 of that is in accounts payable. So the first time I'm going to pay for that is in March. And I pay 40% during March. I would pay 60% during April. So now I can see how much cash I'm going to need to make those expenditures. Again, they're looking at just March in this problem. So the total that I'm going to get from my accounts payable that I have to expect to pay out would be both this total here from my accounts payable, but remember in March I also have this cash portion going out too, so I'm going to include that as well. So hopefully that helps with the cash collections and cash disbursement schedule.